Margaret Thompson had always considered herself a picture of health. At 67, she maintained a modest lifestyle in the quiet town of Ashland, Oregon. Her days were filled with tending to her beloved garden, volunteering at the local library, and enjoying the company of her golden retriever, Daisy. Friends often remarked on her vitality, and she took pride in her independence and active routine. However, subtle signs began to emerge that hinted at underlying issues. She noticed occasional dizziness when standing up too quickly, a persistent fatigue that lingered despite restful nights, and a shortness of breath during her morning walks. Initially, she attributed these symptoms to the natural aging process, dismissing them as minor inconveniences. One crisp autumn morning, as Margaret was pruning her rose bushes, a sudden wave of dizziness overwhelmed her. The world spun, and she found herself on the ground, Daisy barking anxiously beside her. A concerned neighbor witnessed the incident and rushed to her aid, insisting on calling an ambulance. At the hospital, a series of tests revealed elevated blood pressure, high cholesterol levels, and a deficiency in essential vitamins. Dr. Elena Ramirez, a compassionate and thorough physician, sat with Margaret to discuss the findings. "Margaret," Dr. Ramirez began gently, "your test results indicate that while you're not facing an immediate crisis, there are areas of concern. Your blood pressure and cholesterol are higher than we'd-like, and you're lacking vital nutrients that support overall health." Margaret listened intently, the gravity of the situation sinking in. She had always believed her lifestyle was sufficient to maintain her health, but the evidence suggested otherwise. "I understand," Margaret replied, her voice tinged with worry. "What steps can I take to improve my health?" Dr. Ramirez outlined a comprehensive plan focusing on dietary adjustments, increased physical activity, and regular monitoring. She emphasized the importance of incorporating nutrient-rich foods, particularly fruits known for their health benefits. Fruits like blueberries, apples, bananas, pomegranates, oranges, kiwis, papayas, and avocados are excellent choices, Dr. Ramirez explained. They're packed with antioxidants, vitamins, and fiber that can help lower blood pressure, improve cholesterol levels, and boost your immune system. Determined to take control of her health, Margaret left the hospital with a renewed sense of purpose. She began researching the recommended fruits, learning about their specific benefits, and how to incorporate them into her meals. She discovered that blueberries, rich in anthocyanins, could improve cognitive function and reduce the risk of heart disease. Apples provided dietary fiber and antioxidants that supported heart health. Bananas offered potassium and magnesium, essential for maintaining healthy blood pressure. Margaret started visiting the local farmers market, selecting fresh produce, and experimenting with new recipes. She created colorful fruit salads, blended smoothies, and even tried her hand at making homemade pomegranate juice. Her kitchen transformed into a hub of culinary exploration, each dish a step toward better health. As weeks turned into months, Margaret noticed significant improvements. Her energy levels increased, the dizziness subsided, and her blood pressure readings began to stabilize. Regular checkups with Dr. Ramirez confirmed the positive changes, reinforcing Margaret's commitment to her new lifestyle. Inspired by her progress, Margaret shared her journey with friends and neighbors, encouraging them to prioritize their health. She organized weekly gatherings where community members exchanged recipes, discussed wellness strategies, and supported one another in their health goals. Margaret's experience became a catalyst for change, not only in her life, but in the lives of those around her. Her story demonstrated the profound impact of mindful eating and proactive health management, proving that it's never too late to make meaningful changes for a healthier future. It was a breezy Saturday morning in early spring when Margaret decided to visit the Ashland Farmers Market, a quaint open-air gathering she hadn't been to in years. Since her wake-up call at the hospital 3 months earlier, her life had begun to shift in a more deliberate direction. She'd made incremental changes, cutting down on processed foods, cooking more at home, and taking short walks each morning, but she still felt like something was missing. Her diet was improving, yes, but it lacked the diversity and vibrancy she suspected her doctor had hoped for. She pulled on a soft cardigan, tied a floral scarf around her neck, and clipped Daisy's leash on her collar. The dog, thrilled to be going anywhere, danced excitedly at the front door. They walked the 5 blocks to the town square, where rows of tents were already bustling with locals chatting over fresh bread, artisanal cheese, organic vegetables, and colorful flowers. Margaret strolled slowly, enjoying the scent of strawberries in the air, Daisy sniffing every wooden crate and burlap sack along the way. She felt relaxed, but purposeful. Today, she had a mission. Toward the back of the market, under a blue-striped canopy, she saw a vibrant fruit stand that stood out from the rest. The table was overflowing with baskets of rich, glistening produce: plump blueberries, polished apples, velvety papayas sliced open to reveal coral-colored flesh. Behind the stand stood an older woman with a wide, confident smile. Her silver hair was pulled back into a long braid, and she wore a handmade apron covered in colorful fruit prints. Margaret picked up a kiwi, rubbing the fuzzy skin between her fingers. "Those are ripe as of this morning," the woman said warmly. "Perfect for a morning smoothie or just sliced on toast." Margaret smiled. "They look wonderful. I've been trying to add more fruits to my diet lately, especially after a bit of a health scare. Blood pressure, cholesterol, you know the drill." The woman nodded knowingly. "Oh, Edo. That was me 10 years ago." Margaret raised an eyebrow. The woman, though clearly older, late 70s, or maybe even in her 80s, radiated health. Her skin was smooth, eyes clear, posture tall. She certainly didn't look like someone who had ever struggled with poor health. "What changed?" Margaret asked curiously. The woman chuckled and leaned closer, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret recipe. "I started what I call my daily 8. 8 fruits I never skip, not a day. Took me a while to figure it out, but it works." Margaret, intrigued, listened carefully. Blueberries, apples, bananas, pomegranates, oranges, kiwis, papayas, and avocados. The woman listed off smoothly, as though reciting a mantra. "Each one does something different for your body. You eat them regularly, and I promise you, things start to change. Not overnight, but slowly. You'll sleep better, think clearer, move easier." The woman introduced herself as Elena Russo, an 82-year-old retired nutritionist who had been working the same market stall for nearly a decade. She had developed her daily 8 plan after her own health began to deteriorate in her 70s. Rather than relying solely on medications, she began to dig into nutritional science, blending what she learned in her career with her own experimentation. The result, she claimed, was not only a reversal of several health issues, but a daily sense of vitality she had never expected to reclaim at her age. Margaret listened with rapt attention as Elena explained the purpose behind each fruit. "Blueberries," she began, "are your brain's best friend. Those little things are full of anthocyanins, antioxidants that help fight inflammation and oxidative stress, both of which are linked to aging and cognitive decline. I eat a handful with my oatmeal every morning. Apples, heart helpers, soluble fiber, especially pectin, lowers cholesterol. One a day, like the old saying." She held up a banana next. "Potassium powerhouse, great for blood pressure, and they help balance out sodium in the body. Also good for muscles, especially if you're walking or doing light exercise." Margaret nodded, mentally taking notes. "Pomegranates are tricky to peel, but so worth it. The juice has antioxidants that are even stronger than red wine or green tea. Helps with arterial health, blood flow, and memory. I'll sometimes just toss a handful of the seeds in a yogurt." Oranges, of course, give you a big dose of vitamin C, but they also have flavonoids that reduce inflammation and support immune function. "I like them as an afternoon snack." She lifted a kiwi next. "Vitamin C again, but also vitamin K and E, and they help digestion. That little fuzzy thing is like a multivitamin." Margaret laughed. "You're really making me want a smoothie right now." Elena grinned and picked up a papaya. "This one's a gem. Digestive enzymes like papain help your gut, and the beta-carotene supports your vision and skin. I blend it with a bit of lime juice. It's like sunshine in a glass." Finally, she pointed to a small crate of avocados. "And these guys, healthy fats, especially monounsaturated ones. They help lower bad cholesterol and keep your joints moving." I eat a quarter of one with breakfast most mornings. Margaret stood there for a long moment, overwhelmed but inspired. It wasn't about taking extreme measures or following some trendy diet. It was about finding balance, variety, and consistency. The fruits weren't magic pills, but nature's way of supporting the body gently over time. She ended up buying a bit of everything Elena had recommended. As Elena packed her bag, she added a small handwritten card. Here's a smoothie recipe to get you started. You'll find your own rhythm soon enough. Just remember, daily 8. That evening, Margaret carefully unpacked her treasures and arranged them on the counter like trophies. She sliced her first kiwi, scooped out the soft green center, and savored slowly. Then she made the smoothie: half a banana, a few blueberries, papaya chunks, a splash of orange juice, and a quarter avocado for creaminess. The first sip surprised her. It wasn't just delicious, it felt good. Over the next few days, Margaret threw herself into her new fruit-centered routine. She kept a small journal where she wrote down how she felt each morning: energy levels, mood, digestion. She noticed subtle shifts almost immediately: a lightness after meals, fewer afternoon crashes, and even a clearer mind while doing crossword puzzles at night. She called her grandson, Ben, a second-year nutrition student at the University of Oregon, and told him all about Elena's Daily 8. Sounds legit, he said, after doing a little research of his own. Every fruit she mentioned has clinical backing. You might want to track how you're feeling over the next few months. This could be a great case study. Margaret smiled at the idea. She never thought of herself as someone who'd be at the center of a health experiment, but there she was, becoming the proof of her own theory. By the end of the month, her fridge was neatly stocked with a rotating selection of fruits. She bought a set of small glass containers and prepped ingredients in advance. Daisy got used to the hum of the blender in the mornings, and Margaret began sharing samples of her smoothies with friends from her book club. The Daily 8 wasn't just a list anymore. It had become a habit. And habits, she realized, were how change really happened. Not overnight, not in dramatic ways, but bit by bit, fruit by fruit. And all of it started under a blue-striped canopy in the town square, with a woman who wore her years like a badge of honor and who believed that food, simple, beautiful, nourishing food, was the first step to reclaiming life after 50. By the time June rolled around, Margaret's mornings had transformed into a quiet but deliberate ritual. Where once she'd have poured herself a mug of black tea and nibbled on buttered toast, she now woke to the sound of her alarm at 6:30, stretched beside Daisy's warm body curled at her feet, and padded into the kitchen to the hum of anticipation. There, on the counter, sat her daily centerpiece, a wooden fruit bowl brimming with color. Apples, oranges, avocados, and bananas ripened slowly beside a smaller bowl packed with blueberries, pomegranate arils, kiwi halves wrapped in beeswax, and a half papaya waiting in the fridge. Margaret had found that organizing her produce visually encouraged her to stick with Elena's Daily 8, a silent contract with herself. She didn't follow a rigid schedule or count every nutrient, but she had learned to be consistent. Some mornings began with a smoothie, others with a chopped fruit bowl and a spoonful of Greek yogurt. Her favorite blends so far included half a banana, a handful of blueberries, a wedge of papaya, and a slice of avocado, with a splash of almond milk and a squeeze of lime. She'd sit by the window with the glass in hand, watching the sun rise over the quiet street, the sky a watercolor canvas of soft gold and pink. One early summer morning, after finishing her breakfast, she felt a peculiar energy, subtle but undeniable. Her body no longer felt stiff upon waking, and her mind, once foggy in the early hours, seemed sharper. She breezed through the daily crossword, something she had always enjoyed but had found slightly frustrating in the past year. There was clarity now, a mental brightness she hadn't expected to notice, at least not so soon. Encouraged, she began keeping track of her sleep as well. After years of tossing and turning, waking multiple times in the night, she was now able to fall asleep quickly and stay asleep longer. It wasn't perfect, there were still occasional restless nights, but the overall trend was comforting. As her body responded positively, her curiosity deepened. With Ben's encouragement, she downloaded a basic health tracking app and began noting changes. How certain fruit combinations affected her digestion, what times of day felt best for her walks, and whether her mood improved on days she included more potassium-rich options, like bananas or kiwis. She wasn't obsessive about it, but she took quiet pride in tuning into her body's needs. Margaret also began experimenting beyond smoothies and salads. She made a banana papaya oatmeal bake, tried a savory avocado and kiwi salsa, and even folded pomegranate seeds into her Sunday pancakes. One afternoon, flipping through an old recipe book, she modified a classic apple tart with less sugar, opting instead for a splash of orange juice and a dash of cinnamon. The result wasn't just healthier, it tasted real, honest, and satisfying. But perhaps the most significant change came not in her meals or health stats, but in her social life. It started simply. One Wednesday morning at her weekly book club, Margaret brought along a large fruit platter she had prepared that morning. The women, mostly in their 60s and 70s, were used to cookies or pastries during meetings, but the colorful display of sliced papayas, citrus rounds, and apple wedges caught them off guard. "This looks like something from a spa," joked Marlene, a retired schoolteacher with a fondness for sarcasm. Margaret laughed. "I'm trying something new. Elena from the market. Do you know her? The one with the silver braid? She taught me this idea. 8 fruits every day. It's helped more than I expected." The room quieted as they sampled the platter. Then came the questions. "You feel better, how? Which fruits? Do you think it could help my joints?" Margaret didn't pretend to have all the answers, but she shared her experience honestly, the way Elena had. No miracle claims, just steady change. By the end of the meeting, 3 of the women asked for her smoothie recipe. One even offered to trade a bag of lemons from her tree in exchange for a papaya. It sparked something, a ripple. A few weeks later, Margaret invited the book club over for a Saturday brunch, fruit-themed, of course. She made avocado toast with orange zest, mini yogurt parfaits with pomegranate and kiwi, and served fresh squeezed juice with hints of banana and apple. They sat in her backyard beneath the shade of her crepe myrtle tree, laughing and sharing stories, the table cluttered with colorful dishes and half-eaten slices of fruit. Inspired by that brunch, Margaret launched a simple idea, a fruit share circle. Once a week, neighbors and friends gathered in her backyard or living room, each bringing 1 or 2 types of fruit. They swapped, shared recipes, and talked about health. Not in a preachy or clinical way, but with the familiarity of old friends learning something new together. Over time, it became more than just food. It was connection. One week, Linda brought papayas from a specialty store in Medford. Another week, Shirley introduced them to dried kiwi chips she'd ordered online. Soon, people were bringing homemade fruit-based snacks, banana oat muffins, blueberry chia pudding, orange avocado salad. Ben even joined a few times, sharing insights from his nutrition classes and giving short, informal talks about heart health and brain aging. What surprised Margaret most was how inclusive it became. Husbands began tagging along. Neighbors she barely knew joined in after hearing about the circle from others. And with every gathering, the idea of fruit as more than a snack deepened. These humble foods became symbols of care, of nourishment, of choosing life more consciously. Meanwhile, Margaret kept up her medical appointments. Her next checkup with Dr. Ramirez brought undeniable progress. Her blood pressure had lowered significantly. Her cholesterol levels, particularly LDL, had dropped. And perhaps most importantly to her, Dr. Ramirez noted how much more alert and energetic she seemed. "You made a real change," the doctor said, smiling as she reviewed the chart. "You're doing more than just managing your health. You're improving it." Margaret left the clinic with a light heart. She wasn't chasing youth, and she wasn't aiming for perfection. What she was chasing, no, cultivating, was quality, vitality, the ability to walk her dog without aching joints, to wake up with clear thoughts, to sit around a table with friends and feel fully present. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and bathed the living room in amber light, she stood in her small backyard garden, gazing at the newly planted avocado sapling she had decided to try growing. Beside it, a blueberry bush, still small and tentative, had begun to flower. Her hands, once unsteady from fatigue, felt strong holding the watering can. Daisy lay nearby, half dozing, her tail twitching now and then. There was still work to do. Life would continue to change, and challenges would come. But Margaret felt grounded in something simple, something true, the quiet power of tending to her body, her meals, her community, her garden. One fruit at a time. By the end of summer, Margaret Thompson had become something of a quiet phenomenon in Ashland. Not in a viral, social media kind of way, though that too would come later, but in the slow, sincere way a garden blooms. Word of her fruit first gatherings had spread beyond her book club, beyond the neighborhood, and into the broader community. What began as a personal transformation had gently morphed into something more, a ripple effect of inspiration, all rooted in 8 simple fruits. It wasn't something she planned. Margaret wasn't trying to become a wellness advocate or local celebrity. In truth, she still preferred the calm of her garden or a long walk with Daisy over any kind of spotlight. But when she shared her journey, the initial health scare, the discovery of Elena's wisdom at the farmer's market, the slow but steady improvements, it resonated. People related to it because it was real, achievable, human. The idea to share her story more formally came one rainy afternoon as she sat at her kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea and her weathered journal open beside her. Ben had suggested she document the changes not just for herself, but for others who might benefit. "You got something people can connect to, Grandma," he'd said. "You don't need to write a book or anything. Just post what you've already written. Tell your story." So she did. With Ben's help, she started a modest blog. Nothing flashy, just a clean layout with soft colors and photos of her fruit platters and backyard garden. She titled it Fruit First, One Woman's Journey to Health After 67. The first entry was her story. The morning she collapsed, the conversation with Dr. Ramirez, the encounter with Elena, and the slow discovery of the Daily 8. She didn't expect much, maybe a few curious readers. But within a week, comments began to appear. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. "I'm 6'2" and just got diagnosed with high blood pressure. This gives me hope. My mom is 70 and struggling with memory. Sharing this with her. I never thought fruit could make this big a difference. Starting my own Daily 8 tomorrow." Margaret was stunned. She read each comment with a hand over her heart. She responded to as many as she could. And as more people reached out, asking for tips, recipes, even Zoom calls, she realized the truth. She wasn't just changing her life. She was helping change others. That fall, Margaret was invited to speak at the Ashland Community Wellness Center, a cozy building tucked between the town library and the post office. The director, a warm woman named Teresa Lang, had been following Margaret's blog and believed her story could inspire others in the center's 50-plus wellness program. At first, Margaret was hesitant. Public speaking had never been her strength. But Teresa promised it would be informal, a roundtable chat, a space for real conversation. So, on a brisk October morning, Margaret stood before a semicircle of about 20 people, most of them around her age or older, and shared her journey. There was no script. She just spoke from the heart, about the way she used to eat, about the dizziness, the fatigue, about meeting Elena and learning that good health didn't have to come from pills or gimmicks, but from simple, nourishing foods that most of them had eaten all their lives, just not in the right way, not with the right consistency. She passed around a small tray of her favorite smoothie blend in paper cups. There were smiles, nods, questions. How do you deal with sugar cravings? What if I don't like papaya? Does it really help memory? Margaret answered them as best she could, always honest, always humble. "This isn't magic," she said. "It's just daily care. One fruit at a time, day after day. And little by little, you change." By winter, the Fruit Share Circle had grown too big for her living room. The Wellness Center offered its community kitchen and event space every second Saturday of the month. They called it Fruit First Saturdays. Each gathering had a theme: heart health, bone strength, brain function, digestion. Attendees brought fruit-based dishes to share and learned how different nutrients supported their aging bodies. Margaret would open each session with a short story about her garden, or a new recipe, or a reflection on aging. The sessions began attracting younger attendees too, sons, daughters, even college students who wanted to learn how to support their older relatives. Ben, now in his final year at university, helped co-lead some sessions. He began developing printable guides and even designed a simple mobile app called Daily 8 to help people track their fruit intake and learn quick nutritional facts. He credited his grandmother for the idea in the app's welcome screen, inspired by Margaret Thompson, who reminded us that aging well starts with what we put on our plate. But amid all this growth and praise, Margaret never lost sight of her roots, literally and figuratively. Her garden became her sanctuary, her favorite place to reflect on everything that had changed. She expanded her small backyard into a mini orchard, with 2 avocado trees, blueberry shrubs, a dwarf orange tree, and a trellis where passion fruit and kiwi vines began to climb. It was modest, but full of life. She still began every morning with a quiet moment, sometimes in the kitchen, sometimes in the garden. The fruit bowl was always full. Her journal was now thicker, filled with not just her thoughts, but recipes, poems, even pressed petals from her garden. Her health continued to hold steady. Dr. Ramirez, amazed at her transformation, now referenced Margaret's case to inspire other patients. Her blood pressure remained in the healthy range. Her cholesterol was better than it had been in years. She no longer feared stairs or long walks. Her sleep was deeper, her mind sharper. And while she accepted the natural aging of her body, she now faced it with calm, with clarity, and even with joy. One afternoon, as the first snow began to fall, Margaret received a letter from Elena. The envelope was handmade, sealed with a pressed flower, and inside was a note written in Elena's elegant hand. Dear Margaret, I've heard of what you've done. I always knew the fruits would find their way to more than just my little stall. You took the seed and grew something beautiful. I'm proud of you. Keep going. With love, Elena. Margaret wept quietly, holding the letter to her chest. She hadn't seen Elena at the market in weeks. Someone had mentioned she'd gone to live with her daughter in California. But her presence lingered in Margaret's life, in the saplings in the garden, in the cards still pinned to the kitchen bulletin board that read, Daily 8. Spring arrived again, and with it, another season of growth. Margaret turned 68 that April. Her birthday party, hosted in the garden beneath a canopy of blooming citrus blossoms, was filled with laughter, multi-generational guests, and a buffet of fruit-based dishes contributed by all her friends from the wellness circle. At the end of the day, as dusk settled and Daisy curled up at her feet, Margaret sat with Ben under a string of glowing garden lights. He handed her a small, leather-bound notebook. "What's this?" she asked, turning it in her hands. "I think it's time you wrote the book," he said with a grin. Margaret laughed. "Maybe, but only if it starts with blueberries." He smiled. "It has to." She opened the notebook and stared at the blank first page. Then, slowly, she began to write.